look at these three beauties. The first one up today is Hello Beautiful by Napolitano, and it comes to us from Penguin Viking. She wrote, some of you may remember, a New York Times bestseller, Dear Edward, and you know what you're going to get. She's a very polished writer. We have, well, before I actually launch into the story, I read after the fact that this was a book that was based, or not based on, but written as a homage to Little Women. And I'm very glad that I read the book without knowing that at all, because it does get referenced and you do begin to see it at the end. And it was only on reflection later, having read a note on the actual idea, that I saw all of the connections between the Padavano sisters and the March sisters. Hello, darling. Are you going to help me? We have got, sorry, I'll try and get to the camera, round the dog. Hello, beautiful. Hello, beautiful, as is title of book. We have got 4 sisters, Italian-American. They come from a not very wealthy neighborhood. It's a bit chaotic. They have a very sort of tough mom, poetic dad who's a bit of a loser. And then these 4 girls, very different. And you do there see maybe this kind of the March sister sort of separation of characters. We've got Julia, who's the eldest, who's really super organized. You've got Sylvia, who's bookish, kind of librarian, bit more like her dreamery poet father. We have, and then twins, Cecilia and Emmeline, who are arty and nurturing. Into their lives walks this character, William. And William comes from a very sort of opposite household. He's wealthy. His parents are very, very distant and very, I presume, at least that's what I took away from this, that we have this difference of the beginning of your lives, how important that is. You have the 4 Padavano sisters who are loved, they're united, almost too much. And then you have William, who was born into this sort of antiseptic household where there has been great trauma, because he never learns this, or he learns this very late. There had been a younger child, a little girl, Caroline, who had died before he was born, and his parents sort of rejected him outright and dealt with their own trauma by retreating into grief, which is something that will carry through this whole book. It's about how this sort of unification, how this can start splitting apart, because William's life is already fractured. He becomes, his first connection with people comes when there are kids playing on a basketball court and they say, hey, you know, you want to come and play with us? And no one's ever done this to him before, so it's the first time he connects. And this great love of basketball keeps him upright, and he's a very tall man throughout his life. It's there's quite a lot of basketball in it, but not too much. I think she got that quite right. Then you have this idea of, so his life is already fractured and he inside himself is kind of fracturing. And then you have these 4 sisters who life has that way of doing it, breaking us all apart. There will be decisions, there will be betrayals, there will be enormous love, there will be a great love of books, obviously. And will these sisters who begin to separate, will they be able to come together and find that unity, although we have moved on from where we were at the start of the book? People are complicated. She writes complicated people. It's not, I'm not saying it's not plot driven. You have this kind of overlay of this was his perspective, this was her perspective, this was the sister's perspective, but all the time moving the plot forward. Not highly plot driven. It's really character driven, and an absolute, it's rich. It's a very rewarding read, and lots of emotions as well. And we're doing the emotions today. Second one up, talking about emotions, Eva Rice. This Could Be Everything comes to us from Simon & Schuster. Oh boy. She's on about her 14th book. I think I said 14th. She wrote The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets, which became kind of a modern vintage classic. It's a very, this is a very nostalgic kind of book dealing with huge issues, but there's a very fast-moving plot, and it really keeps you, like, I dipped into that book and I just didn't come out the same person at the other end. I found that fascinating because it has that sort of It has nostalgia. It has the 90s, which I love. It has the music of the 80s and 90s that I grew up through. And we have a 19-year-old protagonist. So sort of sitting there saying, yuck, thank you, dog. Why am I relating to this book so much as a 60-year-old? This is very young, it's very fresh, it's very vibrant, and I don't know, I just fell in love. Absolutely stunning book. So we have a young girl called February Kingdom. So there's this outlandish thing going on all the time, and it's fun. She's living in Notting Hill in the 1990s, and her past is absolutely catastrophically tragic. Almost too much. She lost 2 parents in the King's Cross fire 2 years prior to the start of the novel, and she'd lost her sister 6 months ago in a car crash, and her sister was this divine model. They were twins, they were bonded, whereas February, she was called Diana, and February herself is a little bit more sporty, more brainy, and doesn't think much of herself. Obviously, when you're being compared to a model, life gets very complicated. I wouldn't know anything about that. She lives with her uncle and aunt, Robert and Anne, and their marriage is pretty wobbly. I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but they're negotiating their own difficulties. One day, a little yellow canary, she hears it, tweeting down in her kitchen, and down she goes. It's the first time she's come out of her bedroom, where she sits in this incredible miasma of grief, listening to the top 40 countdown, and music is constant in this narrative. Eva Rice has a great knowledge of and puts to great use the different songs or hits that she mentions, and it's almost a sort of comforting, ritualistic thing that February goes through. She's never picked up a tennis racket. She's never read the news reports of her sister's death. There's an awful lot of grief going on. This canary, called Yellow, has an owner, and it's when she meets this owner, Theo, that you understand that things have been set in motion. There is an array of outlandish, quite outrageous, very glamorous. There's all of that going on, but underneath, she's really working on who we are, how we get out of this huge rut of being left alone. What bravery does it take? And what difference would it make to your life if Michael Hutchence turned up outside a record shop and said hello to you? A stunner. Loved it. And the last one, of course, the one we have all been waiting for. This is my reading copy, so it's equally beautiful, just not that bit at the top. Pip Williams, The Bookbinder of Jericho, comes to us from Affirm Press. And it is all we have been hoping for. That is all I can say. It is, if you've loved the Dictionary of Lost Words, and a lot of us did, then I think you're, I'm not going to say you know what you're getting, because you don't. There's a lot of new and very exciting material in this one, but it's a companion novel. So we're back in a universe that I think a lot of us didn't want to leave in the first place. So thank you. We're popped back in there. And a couple of characters stray into this story from Dictionary of Lost Words. We have a young girl, Pip, and her twin sister. This is really a thing, twin sisters, isn't it? We have it in all 3 of my novels, and I've only just realized that could tie all 3 together as well as being great stories about love and sisterhood, I suppose. She had a young woman, Peg, twin sister, Maudie, and they live on a houseboat and no parents. They're working in the bookbinding industry in Jericho or in Oxford, and we have Maudie's a little bit special. We also have the team of people that they work with as bookbinders, and we meet again some of the characters from Dictionary of Lost Words. We have, because we're between 1914 and 1918, we have the arrival of Belgian refugees, and Peg, who is in some way frustrated by her life. She's fascinated by the job she does, only insofar as it gives her access to the pages that she's working on. And sometimes if a page has been badly folded, then that whole process is described very eloquently and elegantly. It's very lovely. She will then take those she pockets those ruined pages. We have a lot of this kind of surreptitious stealing of words, or taking words in order that we might own them. And you know that there's a great desire in this young woman to have done more with her life, but she had promised her mother she would look after Maudie. And I think this is what the novel is partly about, is that how do we honor the promises we make to both the living and the dead? So we're in a theme of war, so it's a very central theme. How does she negotiate her desire for herself and looking after Maudie, as she said, and how much care does Maudie really need? We come across a very lovely cast, and again, a smallish cast of characters. We have Lottie, who's a woman, a Belgian refugee, who comes to learn how to fold the pages, and she's come from Louvain, where she was a librarian, and everything was burnt to the ground, and Lottie has never spoken. So we have also, like Maudie repeats, that kind of echolalia, repeats fragments of sentences, but they're always the right word for the situation. Lottie doesn't speak. The love interest for Peg, who is a Belgian soldier who she reads to, and eventually he's terribly disfigured and has been, his war wounds are quite atrocious. She's connecting with the man inside that shattered exterior, and it's about how language can be faltering, but fragments are enough. I found it it's a gorgeous book. It's about dreams. She's back in the world of suffragettes. We have the lovely Tilda, who's very glamorous, sort of almost that cabaret feel, who has gone off she comes sporadically to say hi to them on the Calliope houseboat, but she's gone to be a volunteer nurse, and there we come across the character Vera Britton, who is, inserting real historical figures is always a plus for me. So she's nursing. Who do we care for? Do we care for our enemies? Who are we nursing? Who are we looking after? To whom do we have a debt? There are deep, deep, deep things going on while we have this lovely, glorious fight for women, and women really getting what they want or finding ways in a system that is heavily, heavily biased against them. Absolutely glorious. You will not be disappointed. We can't be disappointed. Lots of love in those. That's it for today. Goodbye.